Welcome to IVF This, episode 49, Infertility Burnout, part 2. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. I'm a mother to two beautiful and feral boys. I'm married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello, my beautiful friends. I'm so excited to bring you this episode, which is a continuation from last week's part 1 about burnout. The reason I broke them up into 2 parts is because infertility burnout is not regularly nor openly discussed. So I really wanted to take the time to explain it and break it down, kind of make my case for burnout. So this week, we're going to be talking about what to do with that information. Most of you listening to this are probably already experiencing some signs of burnout, or you're like fully there. And that's okay. Hope is not lost, I promise. I'm going to talk about several things that are often discussed around stress and burnout. And if you'll remember from last time, I mentioned that so much of the research is directed and around the idea of burnout in the workplace. So some of it is going to be applicable more to that, but I'm going to try and make it make sense for infertility. Now, before I get into those, I want to make it abundantly clear that this is not necessary to do all of these things, or any of these things for that matter. These are all choices. These are all options. You try one and don't find it terribly beneficial? Cool. You can change your approach. You're not married to any of this. I've probably said this before, but we don't use this type of work against ourselves. So there's no place for shoulding. I should do this or I shouldn't do that. Nope. Nothing like that. This is about giving you more tools in your tool belt to help you when you're experiencing or when you think you might be experiencing burnout. Okay? No bullying allowed. All right, let's go. So the first thing is everything we did in the previous episode. We created awareness around it. We can now recognize the signs, which is the most important thing. Remember, we can't fix nor heal from what we can't see. And now we see it. So next, ask yourself, are there any immediate changes that you can make? Are there things that you can take off of your to-do list while you're still going through treatment or while you're still feeling those symptoms of burnout? Do you volunteer somewhere and you can ask to be taken off the schedule for a couple of months? Is there a work project or something that you could hand off or delegate? Is there something around the house that you could hire out for? One of my favorite questions to ask myself when I have a seemingly never-ending list of to-dos and I feel so disconnected from my life is, okay, I want to get this done, but am I the only person that can do it? Who or what else could I utilize? So for instance, in my business, I have a podcast producer. His name is Anthony, and I tell you friends, he's a godsend. He edits the podcast and does all of the back-end technical stuff to make sure it's available to you guys on Mondays. Now, could I have figured out how to do this myself? Sure. It definitely wouldn't sound as amazing as it does, and it would have taken me much longer and probably every week taken me much longer than it takes him. Again, is this something I could do? Yes, of course. But does it have to be done by me? No, not at all. We live in a time where help is available to us everywhere. Think about grocery trips. Maybe you can do pickup instead of spending an hour a week at the groceries. Preparing dinner. There are so many things that we tell ourselves that we have to do, yet we don't necessarily have to be the ones to do them. Now, I'm not really talking about procrastinating on things because that'll actually only make your anxiety worse. When we procrastinate, we just put doing the thing off, but it doesn't leave our minds. I'm not saying that I don't procrastinate. In fact, if my husband was on this podcast, he might not be able to compose himself because he would be laughing so hard because I totally procrastinate. But I also recognize that when I do it, it doesn't actually create peace of mind or calm for me. It's usually the opposite. So take a look for ways that you can take things off of your list. It doesn't always have to be something you purchase or money that you pay out. Maybe there's a friend that really loves to cook and you really love to do something else, so maybe you guys can trade, right? So it doesn't always mean that you're spending money, but just getting a little bit more creative to try and take some of these things off your list. Practicing mindfulness is up next. Meditation, yoga, journaling, sitting still, for the love of God. It doesn't have to be a laborious process. Just think about taking time to connect with your body is going to be very important. Giving your brain some airtime by using journaling can be incredibly beneficial. You guys know that on here, and especially on my Instagram page, I talk about the many benefits of journaling regularly. So many of us don't even get started, either because we think it'll take too long, it'll be hard, or we don't know what to write. So here's my hack. Google or get on Pinterest, or you can visit my Instagram page under my highlights and look for journal prompts. Find one, just one, write it at the top of your page, and then set a timer for 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Let yourself write for 2 minutes. Stop yourself at that mark. Write past it if you feel like you're on a roll, but just give yourself the gift of 2 minutes and see if that helps. Next, you guys know this is one of my favorite words ever. Compassion. Compassion, compassion, compassion. Remember the last episode when I said, I didn't think that our thoughts necessarily created burnout, but our thoughts can 100% exacerbate burnout? This is where compassion comes in. So we're already feeling bad because of all of the things going on. And then we double down on ourselves by calling ourselves names, shooting on ourselves, just adding layer and layers of crap on this shit parfait. Compassion, my beautiful friends, is the key. Remind yourself, I know why you're feeling this way. Most people in my position would probably feel this way. Sometimes wallowing, if that's what you want to call it, is self-care. Sometimes crying or screaming or retail therapy is the best medicine. That there's no wrong way to do this. There's no manual for how you are supposed to, quote unquote, handle the IVF experience. Even giving yourself some semblance of compassion, just a tiny sliver, a morsel of compassion, can only benefit you. So those are the kind of generic things that people talk about in reference to burnout. So the next two things that I'm going to talk about are much more specific to the things that I really teach on. So I want to make sure that you understand that the ones before are also important, very important, but these are the two things that I really strongly suggest. Okay. So the first one is creating a minimum baseline for yourself. I break down what a minimum baseline is in episode 25 of this podcast if you want to learn more about it. Essentially, it's the list of things, the minimum amount of things you decide to do in a day to meet the basic necessities of your life. This process is incredibly helpful because it gives you the basic framework for how you can show up in your life on a day when you are just not feeling it. Do yourself a favor, check out the episode for the first time or again, and create a minimum baseline for yourself. I cannot begin to tell you how hugely, massively important my minimum baseline is to me and my life. I have this running thought, probably talked about it before. It's like this, what I call a ticker tape thought. It's just one of those thoughts that just loops around and around and around constantly. And it is, I am not doing enough. It's almost like this shrill, loud voice. I can almost picture one of my least favorite teachers from elementary school saying it. You're not doing enough. You're not doing enough. That's like my default setting. It's on a constant loop. So when I would experience the normal lows of life in the context of infertility or not, because the lows come all the time. It doesn't mean that just because you're experiencing infertility or in a cycle or something like that, that you're not going to experience lows. That's just part of life. So when I would experience the normal lows of life, I would just beat the crap out of myself for, you guessed it, not doing, quote unquote, enough. When I created a minimum baseline for myself, I got to intentionally decide what enough was. Enough for me, for example, is changing out of my pajamas, feeding myself and anyone that is dependent upon me for their survival, meeting with my clients if I have them scheduled. That's it. That is enough some days. So again, I'm going to encourage you really strongly. If you've already listened to the episode, that's wonderful. Go back and listen to it again. Slow down, take some notes, and then at the end of that episode, create a minimum baseline for yourself. This is like bare bones, down to the nuts and bolts of what you can do in a day to keep yourself and your home functioning. All right? And finally, we're going to talk about something called the stress cycle. I've never talked about it on this podcast before, so this is brand new, but it is probably the most important takeaway that I can offer you regarding burnout. Now, I did not coin this term, nor any of the information that I'm about to tell you. This came from the book called Burnout by doctors Amelia and Emily Nagoski. They are identical twins. And frankly, I think this book should be required reading for any woman. It's on Audible, it's in paperback, I think it's on Kindle. Check it out. I implore you. The information in there, which I'm going to kind of really condense a big section of it, but it is so important, I think, for every woman. In the book, the authors clearly lay out how our lives are filled with stress day to day. They don't even talk about infertility, y'all. They talk a little bit about a chronic illness, but they're really just talking about you living as a woman in this world in everyday life. And the problem that they talk about isn't necessarily that we face stress all day, every day. It's that we don't complete what they have termed the stress cycle. By not completing the stress cycle, we leave ourselves vulnerable to burnout, or we just continue to live in burnout. So what is the stress cycle? I'm so glad you asked. I want you to think of it as the moment after you have been exposed to a stressor, a situation, a thought, it doesn't matter what it is, but that moment after when your body starts to calm down and it realizes that you are not in immediate physical danger. This is the completion of the stress cycle. So let's illustrate it by taking it back old school. When our ancestors swerved or survived a threat, say being chased by a tiger, they might have achieved their survival by running away to their village. Here, that individual, that ancestor, used their muscles or maybe threw some spears at the animal to slay it. Everyone jumps, cheers, celebrates. Woohoo! In this moment, for the runner-awayer, I don't think that's a thing, but the person who ran away, the stress cycle is complete. They tied it up. It's a perfect little circle. For a modern example, you can literally use anything about our infertility experience or life in general. Maybe a birth or pregnancy announcement, someone says something asinine, your clinic name pops up on your phone as an incoming call, you're waiting for your test results, any and all of the things. Your cortisol and adrenaline spike. Your body enters fight or flight. It chooses, let's say, flight, and commands you to bolt to safety anywhere far away where terrifying changes can't get you. Apart from, of course, you don't. You don't run away. You don't hide. You scroll your phone for whatever information you can find. You panic eat the pantry. You disconnect or distract yourself with Netflix or Hulu. The problem with that is that you have not completed the stress cycle. And as the authors note, when this happens daily or multiple times a day, your stress response is in chronic activation. Chronic activation means you are vulnerable to burnout because eventually your adrenal glands and everything that's in your body is going to, quite literally, burn out. It's not good. It means you're lit up with blood pressure, increased chance of heart disease, right? As well as digestion that has been played with. The stress response slows your gut function down. It actually slows a lot of the blood flow down and it moves it to your appendages so that in case of running or doing something physical, you have all of the power and all of the momentum. This is part of the flight response, right? This is how our ancestors were able to run so fast, is because some of our automatic functions in our body kind of reroute to where we need them for speed, endurance, to be safe. Okay? Bottom line, completing the stress cycle, thus taking yourself out of the stress response, is imperative for your health and potentially your fertility. Now, I'm not saying this to indicate that infertility is somehow your fault because you, quote unquote, don't manage stress well. It's not. That's not what we're talking about. But stress has a significant impact on your overall health. By completing the stress cycle, you help your body to process and release the stress. When you process and release the stress, it doesn't compound. If it doesn't compound, you're not at risk for burnout or continued burnout. Remember last episode, I said that burnout is an accumulation of events. It's not one or two things, it's compounded. If we can manage the stress that leads and builds burnout, that's where we're going to see the most impact. So here are the 7 things that they talk about in burnout to help you complete the stress cycle. The first one is move. Running, dancing, swimming, walking, whatever. The Nagoskis talk about exercise as your first line of attack in the battle against burnout. 20 to 60 minutes a day. If you don't have any exercise equipment or it's cold outside, that's fine. Go on YouTube and look up quick 30-minute, 20-minute body weight exercises. There's a great YouTube channel called XHIT, which is the letter X, HIT. And they have a lot of great things where you don't even have to use weights, but it is an option for you to move and get some exercise. They recommend 20 to 60 minutes a day. If you can get 20, beautiful. Yoga, it doesn't matter, guys. Just moving your body. Number 2, breathing. My God, you're already a master at breathing because we have to do it all the time, right? But slow, deep breaths help to down-regulate the stress response, especially when the exhalation is long and slow and goes all the way into your breath so that your belly kind of contracts. A simple practical exercise is for you to breathe in a slow count of 5, hold that breath for 5, and then exhale for a slow count of 10, and pause for another count of 5. Do that 3 times, just 1 minute and 15 seconds of breathing. See how you feel. It's that little. It's that tiny little adjustment. Number 3, talk to people. I talked about this a little bit more in the first part of the episode, but talk to people. Friends, social interactions, anyone who you feel offers you safety and support, a coach, a therapist, It doesn't matter, but allowing yourself the opportunity to explain, talk, to tell your story, which is a fundamental need for so many of us. I have a friend of mine who is going through a really traumatic experience with one of her family members. They're very, very sick. And every time she talks to me, she always says things like, which I think is incredibly common, "I'm sorry, I don't mean to burden you with this." One of my favorite things to say, and it was said to me, and I feel terrible because I can't remember who said this to me, but they said to me, and I say to her, "You are not burdening me with anything. You are taking it out of, let's say, a bag or a box, and we're looking at it together. There's no burden," right? So talking to someone is incredibly important. Number 4, which is probably my favorite, is laugh. Laugh. Laughing together and even just reminiscing about the times we have laughed together increases relationship satisfaction and personal satisfaction. I don't mean social or fake or posed laughter. I mean belly laughs, deep, impolite, cackling, helpless guffaw laughter. When we laugh, according to the neuroscientist Sophie Scott, we use an ancient evolutionary system that mammals have evolved to make and maintain social bonds and regulate emotions. Let me put it this way. You don't even have to have anyone else that you're laughing with. Go on YouTube and search for your favorite comedian, or maybe a Saturday Night Live skit. Or one of my favorite ones is the old, I think it was Geico commercial, which was the hump day where the camel walked around. I can pull that up on YouTube and nearly pee myself every time because it's one of my favorite commercials of all time. The point is that you don't have to rely on someone else to do that. You can help yourself laugh. Okay, so number 5 is speak to loved ones. Now, this is different from number 3, which is talk to people. Speaking to loved ones, it doesn't have to be about your journey or your infertility. This goes more towards what we talk about, or what I've talked about in previous episodes about self-isolating and that alienating feeling that we have that actually can lead to compounding burnout. So when a friendly chit chat with a colleague doesn't cut it, or you're too stressed for laughter, deeper connection with a loving presence might be exactly what you need. Most often, this comes from some loving, beloved person who likes, respects, and trusts you, whom you like, respect, and trust. It doesn't have to be physical affection, though physical affection is great. A warm hug in a safe, consensual, trusting context can do as much to help your body feel like it has escaped a threat as jogging a couple of miles, which is, arguably a lot less sweaty and hard on your body. The optimum amount of a hug, I don't know if any of you know this, is 20 seconds. The average hug lasts about 9 seconds. But the 20-second mark, your body actually releases the feel-good hormone called oxytocin, which is so fun. It's so cuddly. It's so squishy. It's amazing. So I want you to think about that. Think about, again, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to bring the infertility conversation in. You don't have to bring in the fertility treatment conversation in. Those aren't necessary. If you want to, you can. I'm not saying that, don't go there. Don't allow yourself to go there. But just connecting with someone that you care about. Maybe it's your best friend. Maybe it's your work bestie. Maybe it's your boss, if you have that kind of relationship with your boss. Maybe it's an old friend that you've known forever, but you kind of only intermittently talk, or maybe sporadically talk, something like that. Another example of affection, right? We're going to use a little bit more, another example of time, but one great example of affection is the 6-second kiss. And this advice comes from researcher John Gottman, who's basically like the world's expert on relationships. And every day, he suggests that you and your partner kiss for 6 seconds. Now, this doesn't mean you're going to town with each other. It can just be like a prolonged peck or something like that. That 1 6-second kiss, mind you, not 6 1-second kisses, but 1 6-second kiss is too long to kiss someone that you don't like. And it's far too long to kiss someone you don't feel safe with. So this is already an opportunity for you to have connection and intimacy with your partner, with the person that you love. So that's number 5. Number 6, which is something that I don't think many of us allow ourselves to do in this context, but it's cry. Anyone who says crying doesn't solve anything doesn't know the difference between dealing with stress and dealing with the situation that causes stress. That's a quote from the book. So good. You guys have to listen to this book or read it. It's amazing. Have you had an experience of just barely making it inside anywhere, a room, a door, a car, before you slam the door behind you and burst into tears for 10 minutes? Then you wipe your nose, big, heavy sigh, and you feel relieved from the weight of whatever was making you cry. You may not have changed the situation that caused the stress, but it is that physical release that allowed you to complete the stress cycle. All right, and the last one is doing something creative. Engaging in creative activities leads to more energy, excitement, enthusiasm tomorrow. Why? How? Like sports, the arts, including painting, sculpture, music, theater, storytelling in any form. Create a context that tolerates and even encourages big emotions. 2 of my clients actually cook. One of my clients is an incredible baker and cookie designer. She's actually sent me some pictures and I'm completely jealous because she's amazing. And one of my other clients loves to cook. Both of those are creative outlets that feed their soul. So thinking about those types of things, it doesn't have to be that you go out to Hobby Lobby or Michael's and drop $100 on a new painting kit. It can just be something as simple as maybe you like to do graphic design on the computer. Just something that activates the creative part of your brain and gives you that release. Okay, that is what I have for you today, my beautiful friends. I'm going to say it one more time. A plug for this book is called Burnout. It is by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. Both of them, they're sisters, they're doctors. I think the formal title of the book, the whole title, is Burnout, The Secret to Solving the Stress Cycle. It's incredible. So I highly recommend that you guys either listen to it or read it. I listened to it on Audible and it was wonderful. It's read by the authors, which is probably one of my favorite things. So that is what I have for you this week. Tune in next week. You're actually going to hear from my best friend, and we're going to talk all about how infertility impacted our friendship and what we did to save our friendship and have actually grown closer over the last 7 years. 7 to 9 years, I should say, because that's pretty much the duration of both of our infertility journeys. It started about the same time. So I hope you have a beautiful week, and I will talk to you soon. Bye, friends. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.